Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you coming out of Florida, Nick Smith, and he is the Pharmaceutical Omni Channel Strategist, which we'll find out all about what that is. I'm really excited for the audience to come to the podcast and get more information, get educated, and inspired, entertained, and happy to welcome Nick to the show. Welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris. How's it going?
Yeah, doing well. And uh, talk about your story, your journey, how you got started, and we'll dive
Sure.
right into the combo.
No, sounds great. I appreciate it. Well, my experience in healthcare marketing is maybe a little bit more unique. I didn't start in healthcare marketing. I think a lot of people will, go to school for business or marketing, and then maybe find themselves working at, big agencies somewhere like a Deloitte or something of that nature. But my story is a little bit different. I actually started cutting my teeth in the marketing realm while I was planting churches in the least church region of the United States, which is the Northeast. And so I spent, latter part of 10 years planting churches. At one point, helping the fifth fastest growing church in the United States, and learned a lot. I was able to meet so many different people, see human experiences from thousands of different perspectives, right? From doctors and lawyers, all the way down to, drug addicts and those who are facing housing insecurities, right? But at the end of the day, they were all people, and it was an incredible experience. And kind of transitioning out of that realm led me to the ability in the healthcare marketing space to really understand that regardless of your audience, regardless of who it is that you're talking to, they're just people behind that audience, behind that ideal customer profile, behind your segmentation point. They're people. They might be patients, they might be physicians, they might be payers, whoever it is that you're speaking to. They all have a human experience. They all have very similar lived components, things that drive them, needs. And when you approach things from that angle, things become a little bit easier to understand, and behavior specifically, with marketing, it's driving behavior. Behavior specifically is driven by all these same human components. And so it's been extremely interesting, a different, maybe a different approach than others have taken. But I think it's allowed us to do some really unique things in the last few years. And you mentioned Pharma Omni Channel and what is that? But in the last few years, we had the ability to work with, blockbuster drugs, meaning they sold over $1 billion in revenue, treatments in the rare disease space, really helping patients that are sick find the medicine that they need. It's extremely rewarding when you look at it from that angle.
Yeah, that's a really great introduction, and I'm interested because you're doing marketing at a corporate B2B kind of higher level platform. So talk about just kind of talk about the marketing strategy, pharma, their promotional strategies. What are unique challenges, considerations when marketing these high stakes products?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reality is that the healthcare system as a whole is so complex, right? And it's so diverse, and there's so many different segmentations of the life cycle of a product, or the therapeutic area, or the disease stage, or there's just so many different angles and so many different approaches, so many different stakeholders that are affected, whether it's patients and caregivers, all the way up to payers, formulary decision makers, the physicians who are on site. There's just it's a very complex system, and so. I'll say, from a high level, the fundamentals are all the same. There's a message, there's an outcome that we're trying to achieve, and there are people and actions in between, behaviors that take place in between. It's very fun to have the ability to work with, some of the larger companies in the world who have the budgets, to fund these therapies that are saving lives. And in a lot of cases, in a rare disease state, it takes a tremendous amount of resources for such a small population group that will actually see the benefit or the outcome achieved of that, that it requires, such large budgets and things of that nature. And naturally, that carries over into the marketing realm. And so what happens is you get to experience strategies and deploy techniques that, you otherwise would not be able to do with your Main Street America clients. And so, when I'm working on that B2B front, or working on kind of those larger corporate sides of marketing adventures, really what we're doing there is we're learning and we're growing and we're testing things just like you normally would. And then we're taking all of those same strategies and all of those same techniques, and we're providing that back to maybe some of the smaller physician-owned practices, right? And so now we're taking those same things that we know works in the general population, and we're bringing it down to a more localized level and allowing people who otherwise maybe not would have had access to these strategies that are being used on, say, Madison Avenue, but now they are available and accessible and affordable to Main Street America, to the physical therapist who's running his own clinic, or to the dentist, or to the orthopedic surgeon who's looking to acquire more patients, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you because a lot of the audience, they are doctors, lawyers, and interested in marketing, and you hit it on the head, like how you can actually take these concepts and principles and apply them to like small business owners. The other question, scaling a business, and looks like Loud Canvas Media, you've got over 1,000 website, 400 clients, and what key strategies did you implement to scale your operations successfully? And everybody these days is looking to scale, so what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, and actually, if we want to stay, maybe even using an example can oftentimes be helpful. So if we want to stay kind of on the physician-owned practice side of the house, I think this is a common question that we have. We work with over 100 different physician-owned practices, whether that's doctors, dentists, orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, the wide range there. But the point is that is the golden goose question, right? How do we effectively scale? And it goes back to that personal experience. Unfortunately, the reality is that 40%, there's a recent study that came out, a survey that came out of physicians that said 40% of physicians experience mental health symptoms leaning towards depression, and 1 in 5 or 20% experience suicidal ideation. And the largest pain points that they referred to were certainly things like chronic exposure to trauma, or stigma against getting help, right? Receiving help because of who they are, their status. But some of the ones that stuck out to me were the ones that I deal with every single day. It's stuff like economic pressures, right? Or work-life imbalance, or the lack of support that they feel. And so, what we hear on the ground level with working with physician-owned practices is that the number one concern, the thing that keeps them up at night and causes, this anxiety, this human lived experience that we have, tends to be around patient acquisition and retention. So how are we acquiring new patients? How are we keeping them? How are we making sure that the patient outcomes are as we anticipate and that the churn is low and they're happy? It's also in regards to technology integration. So, there's a lot of disbursement within the systems for how things are managed. And so drawing efficiencies there is usually the first step. Is because you don't want to scale something that's inefficient, whether that's profitably or inefficient resources wise. A lot of times we'll sit down with a doctor and they'll say, I just need to get more patients. And we say, all right, awesome. After we book up your calendar, then what do we do, right? If we can solve that problem, then what? And then that leads to the third most reported concern or thing that keeps them up at night, which is the staffing and the human resources, right? Is what is my plan? And it's fun because in the life cycle of your business, you get to see different business owners experience kind of where they're at, whether they're launching their clinic for the first time, or maybe they're, aging up and figuring out, what does my legacy plan look like? How am I going to pass this on? How am I going to ensure that my work continues? And so depending upon where a person finds themselves in the life cycle of their business or their career, some of those will weigh a little bit more heavy than others in terms of priorities, things that are stressing them out, keeping them up at night.
I love your how you talk about your stepwise approach and different client needs, and just kind of focusing on the the core ingredients. Next question is this age of data and information, AI now. How important is data and analytics in your work at Loud Canvas Media? And I know some of this could be proprietary, just kind of surface level, how data informs your marketing strategies.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, on every level, data and analytics is so important. If we look at the micro level, so solving some of those pain points, and we look at customer acquisition, patient retention, the ability to capture, an NPS score and understand what was the patient's experience prior to going into surgery, post going into surgery, Oftentimes, especially with a smaller practice or a medium-sized practice, the patients are relying on that personal connection point, that bedside manner. They really feel like they get to know their doctor. They're excited to share the results, the positive results with them. And so it's actually a shame. What keeps me up at night is knowing that there's tremendous doctors doing great work, patients who are getting the care that they need and that they deserve, but there isn't a system that's helping them to capture that feedback, share that feedback broadly, so that way other patients who are facing the same, treatment paths can make a wise decision and maybe choose their practice or their therapy instead. And so at that level, you can look at data and analytics and all the way up to a macro level where you're spending millions of dollars in advertising budget, let's say on a month to promote a therapy or a treatment. And the thing that becomes problematic there, anybody who manages large ad spends or multiple vendors, is that oftentimes what happens is as you scale, you have one vendor running one type of outreach, another vendor running another type of outreach for you, and they're the only ones reporting back to you on how well their personal or non-personal promotional material is doing. And we like to say that that's often like having the fox guard the hen house, right? Why would you have the person who you're spending your money with, who's supposed to be doing a good job for you, tell you how well they're doing? And so, in those situations, same thing, data and analytics is so important that you have a unified database that shows you comparatively, how are your pieces, your marketing and your promotional pieces doing? What are the activities and the next steps that are taking place from each one of these different channels, mediums, or sources? And so you can see comparatively, your email newsletter is getting this amount of activity on your website, this amount of pull-throughs, patient enrollments, whatever the case may be, as opposed to your programmatic, your displayed ad, your Google ads, wherever your other media buys may be. And so, from a micro level, somebody who wants to apply it today, data and analytics is so important. You can apply it simply just by collecting the information from your customer, from your patient, and having a system in place to help share that back out. And then again, on the macro, there are systems in place that you can install to help guard and keep that data, to compare it against your spends to ensure that you've got the proper ROI, or that you're making the best decision with your marketing budgets.
Yeah, and then also a follow-up question I have for you is I'm always looking at the what's next and what's on the horizon. So what trends or innovations are you most excited about, and how do you see the future of marketing evolving?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the marketing terminology, I think, is what's evolving most, right? We started with just marketing, and then we've got multi-channel marketing, and then we've got omni-channel marketing, and I think someone's talking about quantum channel marketing. At the end of the day, I like going back to keeping it simple. And there will always be a way to communicate with audiences. There will always be a way to capture their responses, to gauge your performance around that and your return on your investment. There's a lot of things that are changing in the space. Certainly the ability to track user behavior activity and data is changing with compliance and regulatory globally as a whole. The kind of adoption of artificial intelligence by the masses at this point is in many ways advancing the ability for us to identify audiences and to help target better. One of the worst things is when you're getting advertisements, marketing material that is the wrong message to the wrong person, right? You're like, why am I seeing this? It doesn't add value to my life. The best thing is when when an advertisement is placed in front of you, someone shows you something that adds benefit to your life, adds value to your life, and you make a purchase decision or you make some sort of key behavior based off of that advertisement. That was a good ad that was placed in front of you. It was the right message to the right time. And a lot of the technology right now, whether it's artificial intelligence or just the progression of analytics, data and analytics tracking, and omni-channel efforts, things like chatbots and CRM systems, and all of that is centered around how do we put the right message to the right person at the right time. And I actually think that it creates a better user experience, a better customer journey for all of us. As scary as it might seem, knowing that there's all these algorithms that are running and they know so much about us and they're collecting all this information, at the same time, the lived experience at the end of the day will serve the outcomes required, which will eventually provide more value to us and make us behave the way that they want us to behave, right? Which is purchase or consume a little bit differently.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with just AI avatars, and you can clone your voice, and then you just up, and then now they have on these where you can create avatars like that resemble you, and then you can deliver a presentation or whatnot. Just basically based on
How do Chris right now? Am I talking to your AI?
exactly. Yeah, in the future it could be like a hologram or something where you put on your Apple Lens or your Oculus.
The applications are endless. A friend of mine who works in this space, in the healthcare space and technology, and who is speaking on just the advancement of the 3D virtual reality realm, and how in the future compliance trainings and all of your courses and a lot of that work is going to be done just through your headset, and you'll have live time feedback and course correction and all of that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. What advice for those people that are interested in, a lot of interested in tech, marketing, AI? What key skills should they start focusing on or start implementing in their teams?
You can never undervalue, or rather, you can never overvalue the need for community. And so, the beautiful thing about technology right now is it's leveraging, the users are leveraging the technology, for each other. And so, I would encourage anybody who's maybe running businesses, running teams, or interested in kind of getting in that field, to not be afraid of some of the different social media platforms, the Reddits, the X's, the Discords. Really get your hands dirty in there. There's just a wealth of information. Be amazed by the people that you'll meet, how fast you're able to learn. The traditional model of education in content creation, in the marketing realm, and in technology, in so many ways, has been disrupted through alternative learning sources, through school and the different types of courses that are available online and YouTube. And so it's never been more accessible. And it's never been more of a great opportunity for you to dive into that. And then also, just I would encourage you to know what you're good at. For those of you who are excellent in your practice and your field of discipline, you know, going too wide and learning more fields of discipline, it's a never-ending rabbit hole where you can learn as much about technology as you have in your primary field, or as much about marketing as you have in your primary field. I've always found that in a team setting, it makes sense to find those specialists, those who know way more than we could ever learn in 10 years or 15 years, and put them to work, and just have the smart people around us in the areas that maybe we're not as skilled in, or not our primary discipline. So balancing that out is important too, because you can get lost in the world of technology pretty quickly.
Yeah, and how can people find out more about you and reach out to you, check out your work, work with you?
Sure. Well, I am the president of Loud Canvas Media, so you can visit us at loudcanvas.com. And I've actually got a chat bot right on there. So if you want to ask me a question, or want to see, a little bit how, maybe these strategies or these technology applications could be more applicable to your specific business use case, head over to loudcanvas.com, and we'd love to have a conversation with you.
I really enjoy talking with marketers and digital entrepreneurs, especially tech and AI. And for the audience, be sure to give Nick's socials a like and follow, reach out to him, and book a call with him. And thanks so much for coming on.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.